us, what do you mean by behavioral crisis?
Behavioral crisis, of all the bullets, sometimes that is probably the one that our men and women experience in our communities most. If someone loses a job, that can trigger a behavioral crisis. If someone loses a loved one, that can trigger a behavioral crisis. If someone has themselves got the worst diagnosis from their doctor that day, that can trigger a behavioral crisis. And so we want our folks to take all of those things into consideration. When I talk about meeting our community where they are, that's probably the one that we need to really focus on. Yeah.
And as you testified earlier, the police just don't get to meet people on their very best day, do they?
No, they don't.
And the behavioral crisis, as the kind you've described here, can in fact be a barrier to compliance. Would cause an inability to comply, even if not, an intentional inability to comply. That's fair.
Let's go to list, Lena, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so the purpose of the listing a behavioral crisis as a point of consideration for a law enforcement officer is what?
Again, it's recognizing that when we get the call from our communities, it may not often be their best day, and they may be experiencing something that is very traumatic. But we're going to respond, but we have to take that into consideration because, as I mentioned again, we may be the first and last time they have an interaction with a Minneapolis police officer, and so we have to make it count. It matters. Yes, sanctity of life and the protection of the public shall be the cornerstones of the MPD's use of force policy.
What does that mean?
Of all the things that we do as peace officers for the Minneapolis Police Department, and I mentioned the thousands of calls that our men and women respond to. It is my firm belief that the one singular incident we will be judged forever on will be our use of force. And so while it is absolutely imperative that our officers go home at the end of their shift, we want to make sure and ensure that our community members go home too. And so sanctity of life is absolutely vital, that is the pillar for our use of force.
Go ahead. Okay. All we're saying is this here. This video that has been revealed today talks about not only the unjustifiable acts of them killing them, but the unjustifiable acts of how they handcuffed them and heard him say, "I can't breathe," but kept the knee in his back. That's very important because hopefully you will have police officers not do that to whether it's a black person, white person, anybody. You're supposed to be a first responder. The second thing I think that is paramount is the fact I don't want to act like we are naive here to think that it's beyond police to try to cover up an unjustified shooting, because that has happened far too many times in America, where they have tried to cover up unjustified shootings and just sweep it under the rug. So that's why we got to look at this video, because I can't say definitively, Dale can't, Carilla can't, Karen can't say definitively that the police are not going to try to cover up this unjustified shooting. I know we all believe it was an unjustified shooting, Commissioner. Other than that, we wouldn't be representing this family, because we believe what our eyes show us, and our eyes show us that this was unjustified, no matter how many times they try to say, but the black man looked over his shoulder.
So, to be clear on the whole thing, so there's a traffic stop, the driver freely admits he has no driver's license, the passenger is asked to step out of the vehicle at some point.
Yes.
There's kind of a normal back and forth, like you said. When he gets out, he brakes, and as he's running, at some point, for some reason that's undetermined, his body begins to shift, or his head begins to shift, but they've already seen the weapon.
You see the weapon. You see the weapon. Both officers see the weapon.
And as he turns, they became concerned for their safety.
At least one officer.
At least one officer. And he fires twice, misses one, hits him once in the flank. and then Mr. McLean goes about
Now, I don't
another.
think the officer knows if he's shot or not.
Right, I'm gonna get to that. So then Mr. McLean goes about another 50 yards and falls.
Goes about 40 or 50 yards and tosses the gun.
I'm sorry, 40 or 50 yards, tosses the gun,
There's another 20,
goes another 20,
and then either,
falls or drops. And then when police realize, they may not have realized originally he'd been shot. When they realize he's been shot, they call for assistance
within 15 seconds, the shot's fired.
and render aid, and when they render aid, and then that aid comes within about 5 minutes. But at any point, when he turned, or when he shifted, or when he ran, did he reach for the weapon after the initial contact, you know what I mean?
You could see him either holding or reaching for it.
But it could have been his waistband at the same time.
It was, you could see the weapon in his waist.
Right, and he's reaching in that direction.
So he's running, then he has it in his hand, and he's running with it in his hand.
Oh, so he's running with it in his hand.
Running in his hand. And so, if you're the officer, you might get something like this. And so this is what we're trying to figure out,
Okay.
is that.
Okay.
So our discussion here is going to be, our community discussion should be switched from no gun, shot in the back, to the point is, we need something more to understand why he's shot and should he have shot.
Did he ever train the gun on the pursuing officer?
Didn't get a chance.
Never had the, if he was, he never had that opportunity. That's why the officer likely fired when you look at his statement.
And the gun could be some type of jury-rigged hybrid of.
I'm willing to guess, look how easy it broke apart. It's a real weapon.
Right.
It's a real weapon. And this thing may be a ghost gun,
Which is, just define that for us.
where you have a part of the gun that you may obtain the bottom part, and the top part may not have any serial number, or in fact, is stolen from somewhere. You put two guns together. So we're probably gonna guess this is likely a ghost gun. And when you write about ghost guns, you do a little research on it to find out more about the details of a ghost gun, so you feel familiar with it. So this is the concern that caused our entire weekend to be where it's at as a community, the entire shifting of where we are with the social movement that has descended on Pasadena, and where we're gonna go from here.